Hello everyone, long time no see. I have been working on my Silent Hill F script, okay? I just don't really know what I want to do with it quite yet. But I actually wanted to come on here today and talk to you about the new Silent Hill movie that came out, Return to Silent Hill. When I heard people weren't liking this movie, both regular film fans and the Silent Hill fan base alike, I needed to see the dumpster fire for myself, as I like to give everything in this franchise a shot, at the very least, and see if there's any redeeming qualities, or if there's another chance that I could play devil's advocate and make the fan base mad at me again. I say this because you know how I feel about the original Silent Hill movie. I've briefly mentioned it, but I do enjoy it. We don't talk about Revelation, though. I wanted to come on here and give you my thoughts, so first I'll give you a small spoiler-free breakdown just in case you're still wanting to give the movie a shot, which I don't blame you, and then I'll have a spoiler section for people who are wanting and willing to have the movie spoiled for them. Just letting you know now, though. Now, a gap that I've seen with the current wave of reviews is that literally nobody is explaining why exactly they think the movie's bad, so I want to tell you why I think it's bad. But there is also some good that I want to draw attention to. Right off the bat, I want to go ahead and give you my ranking. I give it a 2 to a 2.5 star rating on Letterboxd. Haha. Higher than the 1-star reviews I've been seeing, so that's something. But I do want to explain why. So to start us off with the good, I actually want to talk about the ambiance. It's initially captured very well with James going into Silent Hill, and I think that the continuity of the otherworld transition and the ashy, burning town in the movies versus the fog world from the games is also really nice and still makes sense for the movie versions. I also really do actually appreciate them bringing in the cult elements and also the sort of strange illness within Silent Hill that we find lore pieces on throughout the game. And they tie these both to Mary in some ways, but more on that later. I also think that the beginning of the movie is just very solid. I felt as if the director was trying to insert what he thinks happened within James and Mary's relationship, and I actually didn't mind that at all. He filled in some interesting gaps with the flashbacks that had some potential, and I honestly think that seemed fairly promising. I hope this isn't considered a spoiler, but they do have the beginning bathroom scene, and it's iconic, of course, so it had to be there, and it's fabulously done. I liked it. I think it's really nice, and I think it really sets a nice initial tone. But yeah, I guess we'll talk more about that later. This next scene isn't really a spoiler, but if you're really not wanting to know anything about the movie, here's your early warning. But anyways, James and Maria are hiding from a lying figure behind a car, and there's a sign on the window of the store right next to them that reads drugs as a lying figure passes, and I feel as if this was a callback to Mary's hallway monologue. Maybe, when she says, "Between the disease and the drugs, I look like a monster." And I honestly think that was really well done, and if it was a callback, I think it was excellent. I do also want to go ahead and say that we get to see the other famous monsters from the games, even the bugs, which was really cool, and I actually liked the Pyramid Head look, but that's all I'm gonna say here about that. The characters from Silent Hill 2 were also present. And the last good thing that I want to talk about is something that I discussed with my stepdad about the psychosis element. I think it was really interesting how they dig into that with James, and I do think they also do some really cool things with art and lighting, which also brings me to say that I think a lot of the set design is amazing, and there are moments when we get to see windows in the town with red light sort of shining through, and those were a really nice, I guess, not really Easter egg, but visual element that fans definitely would know are resembling the save squares, and I think that was really nice, and they're in these really interesting scenes. But yeah, that's the good. Now for the bad. The story basically is just a muddled mess halfway through, and I think that the directors actually bit off more than they could chew, which is interesting when the source material gives you so much already to work with. So, yeah. They bit off way more than they can chew, and alongside that, decide to pace this film very, very, very fast. I don't even know how else to say that. They're trying to fit so much in that we literally cannot keep up with what the story is doing and where we're going. And as game fans, we know where we are and where we're going. But the jumps from the apartments to the hospital to the almost missed labyrinth, completely overlooked prison, and then all of a sudden back to the hotel really doesn't make any sense. I don't think this next part is completely a spoiler, but they also lean into the time loop, which isn't completely a bad thing, in my opinion. I do think that it's fun, personally, but I don't ever really take it serious. I think it was their attempt at a happy ending, though. But that's all I'm going to say there. So we know that I did say I liked the Pyramid Head look personally, but the monsters other than him looked off. The lying figure was weirdly angular. The mannequin was something, and the nurses were seen way too briefly. Mary/Maria's final monster and flesh lips were really strange, and how James defeats the monsters is kind of visually interesting and I think makes sense for the movie, but it's still weird, felt a little off. I really hope this doesn't ruffle any feathers, but Maria is annoying, unimportant, and not even the slightest bit alluring, and also felt nearly useless in this story. Eddie would have been better off not even existing in the film, even though his introduction is almost identical to the original game. And Angela and Laura, my poor babies. I'm going to speak for the entire fan base when I say this, because I know that this is part of what people are probably thinking but not saying. That's why I'm here. I despised what they did with Angela and Laura, and they ruined all of the shots also that should have been one-to-one with James and Pyramid Head, and also Maria and Pyramid Head. So take that as you will. That's all for the spoiler-free section that I can give you, as I genuinely have to spoil things in order to give more reasoning. So here's your chance to click off if you still want to go ahead and see what everyone is talking about in the movie. But if you're willing to have this movie spoiled for you, I'm here to also do that. Let's talk about the monsters again. They make Mary's final monster form part of flesh lips on the inside, and it's strange, to be honest with you. We don't really see the lips either, but the design was still similar on the outside to the games. I think the entire point of the monster is to see the lips, but, you know, whatever. Just my opinion. Mary's final monster is... well, I don't like it. She's weird and fleshy looking, and they don't really utilize the final boss vibe as well as they do in the games. I feel like that's kind of a given. Now, I've already sort of hit at the lying figure, but I do want to remind you. I personally believe that they're too angular and bony looking, but when it comes to the other monsters, they're the least of my concerns. The nurses, oh my gosh. They're in one singular scene, and all James does is basically smack them on the head. I mean, he does this to a couple of them, but after that, they're dead. Their head basically disintegrates, okay? I'd argue they're better done in the first movie, actually, the original Silent Hill. They take forever to kill in the games, and James is knocking their heads off in the movie with one blow? Yeah, doubtful. The mannequin was interesting, but disappointing. So they did actually go ahead with the spider mannequin inspiration, but the issue is that she's more spider, less mannequin, and they give her a head. Like, isn't the point that she's 2 sets of legs on a torso? No head. Or am I crazy? I'm really sorry. I have to apologize for making jokes. That's the only way I'm going to make it through this. So they actually tie the mannequin's introduction into the famous scene with Pyramid Head when they're in the apartment and James comes in to hide in the closet, but that's all I'm going to say about that for now. James does have the famous encounter with Pyramid Head in the apartments where they're on the different sides of the metal bars. However, I do dislike this full scene because Pyramid Head breaks through the bars trying to chase James instead of just standing there menacingly. And I think that was sort of the whole point of that in the games, right? Again, am I crazy for thinking this? So after this chase sequence, this leads to the sort of apartment room encounter. Pyramid Head has his moment with the spider mannequin and James is hiding in the closet. So after Pyramid Head kills the mannequin and sort of does the iconic drag, he breaks through the closet that James is hiding in, and he's kind of up in his face, as far as I remember, until the famous sirens ring, to which James and Pyramid Head sort of cover their ears, and it's like when Pyramid Head is mocking James, except they're both there and the closet door isn't really hiding anything. So that was interesting. They looked like the siren was deafening them, and I think maybe this was to indicate to film audiences that James and Pyramid Head are one and the same. But in this moment, we also see under the iconic Pyramid Head, and it's James. So, there's that. So when we talk about the cult, we actually have to talk about Mary's plot. Her dad in this movie is the town cult leader, and she was part of it, and they were giving her medicine that was actually poisoning her, you know, based off of the town illness, and that's how she became sick. Which, don't get me wrong, I actually think that this could have been very compelling, but it was underexplained and very, very muddy. And believe it or not, this ties into characters. I've had to record this audio bit for a little bit because I can't stop laughing. I am not even kidding when I say that an actual line in the movie that comes from Laura is, "What's her full name, James?" And then we see a zoom into a gravestone, and it reads, Mary Angela Laura Crane. Now, don't get me wrong. I have had comments on past videos where people sort of bring this theory in, and I think that with Silent Hill, you can do so much, right? You can do so much, and I never really bash people on the sort of interpretation that they want to think unless it's super sick, because I think that the fan base has a problem with frankly dick writing the, you know, same 8 things that we hear over and over and over, which, don't get me wrong, I agree with, you know, some things that the fan base has to say. I just like to give my new perspective. But come on. If we're gonna do this, we need it to be fleshed out. We need a longer film just in general for something as big as Silent Hill 2. You know what I mean? But yeah, baffled to say the least. Like, I'm not even kidding when I tell you that I looked at my stepdad and we both laughed, and I couldn't stop laughing. And there were only 5 other people in that movie theater, and they weren't laughing. Maybe they were mad, but I was laughing, like gasping for air, because I was like, is this real life? Is this actually the Silent Hill 2 movie that we're getting right now? Come on. Anyway, I have to move forward because I could talk about that forever. Laura is introduced with Pyramid Head right before he comes up to the metal bars, and we have that chase sequence. And Eddie's introduction is right before that, and he stays to watch Pyramid Head's arrival, and then, I'm not even kidding, he's not seen again. He is not seen again. We do not hear anything else about Eddie for the rest of the entire movie. So, Maria. We meet Maria in Rosewater Park, you know, the same as the games, but the park is actually a maze. And the maze, I believe, for the film, was acting as the labyrinth, okay? So Boom, he meets her. Boom, they do whatever else they, do in the movie. I don't even remember because it was so muddled and hard to keep up, okay? They come back to this maze labyrinth, okay? And Maria, like I said, is annoying. She's insufferable. She's not alluring. So James has his back turned. He's not listening to her. And all of a sudden, she's, being killed by Pyramid Head, okay? And James doesn't even seem to care. It didn't even look like he had a reaction or that it mattered in any sort of way. I feel like at least in the games, you know what I mean? We get some reaction from James. Maybe he's remorseful. Maybe he's, guilty. Maybe he is at least a little bit concerned. But it felt like in this moment in the movie, it didn't even matter. Like, we could have even lived without that scene, and I think it would have been fine. Maybe better. I apologize for my exasperation every time I say something, but I can't help it. I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth because it's baffling. Okay. Anyways, Angela, arguably my favorite character and my favorite sections of both the original and the remake. I was really hoping that the movie would do her justice or try to do her justice, okay? Wishful thinking because, yeah, we meet her in the graveyard, sort of moving these bags, and we see that the graveyard is slightly flooded. Cool. When we see her again, it's the iconic mirror scene, right? Where she's holding the big knife. But that scene is confusing because James doesn't even approach Angela in a menacing way or anything that could be read differently. And she gets all weird. Like, I didn't even see him walk up to her before she's like, "Get away from me." It was weird. I know that's not the exact word she says. Forgive me, fan base. Okay? Yeah, the next time we see her, she's on the bed, which is Abstract Daddy, okay? So she's sitting on it and she moves her dress up to show Abstract Daddy's hands sort of grasp her legs from the mattress. And this part was so immemorial because James just touches her face. Keep in mind, Mary's monster is part of this, okay? So her monster is connected to Abstract Daddy, connected to Angela, okay? Yep. Yeah, so he touches her face, which I would say is Angela's face, but it's actually Mary's face, and Abstract Daddy immediately dissipates. He sort of like fades into the moths, right? This is also where we understand that Angela is supposed to be Mary being abused by her cult father. Are you hearing this? Yes, that is where we learn that, okay? And some really quick clarification. What I mean is, how I previously described Flesh Lips and how if you open the middle of it, James looks up and he sees through the middle of Flesh Lips, Mary's monster, like her final form monster that, we've talked about, is in it, sort of. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. So when we get to Abstract Daddy and Angela's portion, Abstract Daddy, kind of comes up and he's briefly there. We briefly see him. But that final fleshy looking Mary is part of that. Like, she's part of Abstract Daddy. Does that make any sense? Like, she's acting as the head. It was really strange. Now, here's where I might find myself in hot water. I actually think that the cult father water sickness or medicine sickness and, abuse connections could have been really interesting and compelling. But I say this only if it was a separate movie outside of Silent Hill. I don't really think it works as, a film, like a Silent Hill film or a headcanon necessarily. But yeah, that's not reality. It exists, so yikes. So now the overall plot breakdown, all right? how do I say this? James knows Mary is dead the entire time, which means the audience knows that Mary is dead the entire time. Yeah, maybe not the entire time, but like a lot of the movie, like very early on, it's mentioned by his therapist. And I want to say this, okay? I actually think the therapist is an interesting angle, and, you know, like I said, I think they dig into psychosis really well, and I think in consideration to, you know, other games and the therapist is really fascinating, but again, completely butchered and misused. And I think it defeats the purpose of the entire story because, you know, as people who have played the games, right, you go into Silent Hill and you have no idea why you're there, why you're this random guy and you're trekking through this town with all these monsters, right? It's all up for your interpretation. And as you work through, you know, then you have a reveal and then you get the ending that I guess you sort of deserve, right? That's how you played the game. And I think, you know, as gamers, we understand where this is going and we know that she's dead the entire time. But as a film watcher, it's kind of butchering that experience, I think, that reveal, that big reveal that you're supposed to get, right? So, yeah, great. I also understand that, you know, James is dealing with that, but I think the whole point, right, is that it's slowly reminding him what he's done. You know, that's what the town is doing. So whether or not you think that he knew the entire time, whatever, I don't really care, and I don't really want to get into that debate. But I think for movie purposes, revealing that so early defeats the viewer experience that you should be getting about this man and why he's here and what he did. You know what I mean? I also want to just say, you know, I think the way that the director sort of fills in the gaps with the flashback sequences is really interesting. And I was looking forward to that because I think it still gives, you know, the fans something to look forward to and something that could be done in an interesting way. And these backstory moments, or, you know, the flashbacks, do show Mary and James being very lovey and romantic with each other. And then as we sort of progress, we see that there's restraint as James sees Mary involved with these cult things more and more. And then, of course, you know, you're expecting some sort of explanation to come along with that, and there is absolutely none. It's all infer this, but we're given a couple of scenes, and it's really hard to piece together. Now, Mary's death. The famous pillow scene. Yeah, that's removed in place of a rag, and she outright just tells James how he can stop her suffering, right? She doesn't say suffocate me with a rag or suffocate me with a pillow. He's just like, basically, is there something I can do? And she's like, you know what you can do. And I think the moment was interesting and I think very sensitive, if that makes any sense. But a rag, you know what I mean? Kind of intimate, but a little too intimate. I think the pillow is where it's like, does James deserve redemption or does he not? You know what I mean? And having this rag is like, oh, like, I just feel like that's so poor. Like, what are we doing, dude? Now, here's where I might find myself in some hot water again with the fan base. I disagree with what I have seen about this particular moment, okay? I actually don't mind the mercy kill or the pity kill that this moment is sort of telling us what happened, okay? The point of James's story is to see if he is worth redeeming, right? Does he deserve to move on with his life, or does he, you know, revel in his guilt and need to die, right? Or does he replace her with somebody else, okay? So his murder, we get to interpret it as we want. I think that's the point, and I think people would disagree with that, but we do. Is his killing, is it mercy? Is it merciful? Is it pity? Does he do it out of pity? Or is it just pure hatred, right? I know that in the games, the original and the remake, he tells her that he hates her, right? He says, I hated you. I wanted my life back, right? And I get that, okay? But again, the ending we get determines if he forgives himself, okay? So I think, if he forgives himself kind of determines if it was mercy or if it was hatred, right? So like if you get the in water ending, maybe it was just pure hatred and he still feels bad about that. And if it was mercy, then he did it out of mercy. He did it because he wanted his life back, right? So I don't know. I think it's something to think about. I disagree with the hating the mercy kill or the pity kill, right? I think at the time he did absolutely hate her, right? But it's obvious that he did love her too. You know what I mean? And I always think back to the hallway monologue, right? She said, it'd be easier if they just kill me, right? So just some food for thought, okay? I disagree with the hatred of the mercy kill. I like that. I like hearing people's sort of thoughts and theories and interpretations about that. But yeah, that's what I'm going to say about the ending. But that's not even what bothered me. I just wanted a pillow over her face in her sleep. Is that too much to ask for? The scene was still sad, and I can definitely understand trying to convey the sadness and the mercy that went into it, but I wanted a pillow over the face. Come on, it's iconic. So the real ending, what ending does James get? He gets in water, okay? He gets the in water ending, which is my personal favorite ending of, the original 3, I guess. But the problem with it is that we don't really know what's going on, so it doesn't make sense. By this point in the film, you would think, oh, okay, he deserves this, but you don't really know what's going on, so it's like, okay. And also, like, James has gone back and forth in a real hospital trying to get help from his therapist in this movie, all to being back in Silent Hill in random places doing who knows, right? Which, again, I think could have been interesting if it was done in a cohesive way, but it wasn't. So that's really great. So in water, he's in there with Mary. Okay, she was in the back of his car the entire time. He places her body after the boss fight into the passenger seat of his Mustang. Okay, and as he's in the water, we start getting like a random flash of the original truck from the car crash that could have happened as a callback to the original game, right? And then all of a sudden, we're back in the Mustang from the very beginning with James, okay? And he swerves out of the way of the truck. And we have the entire beginning scene with Mary play out again, okay? Instead of going towards Silent Hill, they drive away from Silent Hill now at the end of the movie. And he also said something where he indicates that he knows Mary's name. And yeah, they're also not going back that way, right? So he says something that indicates that they're breaking the cycle. They're not doing that again. And I think, again, that could have been really interesting, but like, come on. You know what? Come on. All right, more hot water time for me. Let me say this, and I don't think people will agree with me, but please try and bear with me here. I actually think that the creator has such a good grasp of the franchise that he bit off more than he can chew because he got excited and wanted to fit it all in, okay? But again, an hour and 46 minutes is not near enough time to do what he was trying to do. I think it could have been compelling. But again, like I said, if we're going to do some of these things, I think they could be a really interesting film outside of Silent Hill. I think a lot of fans really just wanted to see the same thing on screen, which I disagree with. But I think in this case, that would be the only thing that helps this movie, and we don't have it, so. What I mean by that is a 1-to-1 ratio of literally everything that happens in the game is impossible, and it really doesn't give, viewers or gamers any new thoughts or points of unsurety, you know what I mean? Like, we know everything from start to finish, and that's really great, but I think you have to add some fresh things here and there at least. But in this case, it was too much. Too much. He was trying to do too much with his weird headcanon that he's got going on, and I didn't really like that or agree with it. All right, yeah, so I would suggest a 3-hour movie, at the very least, like I said. I did also see someone suggest a show that might be a little bit better to sort of capture all the important lore pieces that I think are necessary. And of course, like I said, there's different interpretations that are allowed when it comes to Silent Hill. I get sick of people saying that you're not allowed to have an opinion. They don't outright say it, but, you know, it's inferred by their hateful comments. But there's definitely things that can be cut and are allowed to be cut from the game, right? And other things that probably shouldn't have been tried. I don't like the Mary, Angela, Laura, Crane weird thing we got going on there. I don't like mixing Mary and Angela. I think it ruins the integrity a lot. And so, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Somewhere in the film, my stepdad looked at me and was like, "Bullshit! It took me 4 hours to get to the hospital." And I just laughed because, like I said, very, very quickly paced. We were there in a blink of an eye. So maybe what we're saying is James needs to go around town and try opening every door for an hour to make it more realistic. I'm just kidding. That's a joke. But it would have been a funny moment, right? But here's the thing. It's unrealistic to expect the movie to be exactly like the game. I don't think it should be in any case really ever. I think there should definitely be callbacks and scenes from the game, right? But James can't fight every monster for 10 minutes each time, right? Maybe a shorter version, okay? However, this movie didn't even take the source material and slightly tweak things or improve it. It took the source material, every newspaper article and pamphlet from the town, every character and random lore piece, rolled it into a ball the size of Eddie, and tried to fit it in the most minuscule hole in the wall possible. But unfortunately, that hole is gone now. So all that remains of the hole that was once there is an empty void waiting for someone to do the series justice. Thank you so much for tuning in. I've never really done a movie review before. Maybe this is a little bit too lengthy, but I really hope you enjoyed. And I really hope that the explanations do some justice to why the movie is bad, but also, you know, complement the things that do need recognition in some capacity. But yeah, I've never done this before. I hope you enjoyed. If you want me to do more movie reviews, I would absolutely take so much pleasure in doing that for you. But yeah, I will see you in the next video. Goodbye, everyone.